This is a Going Back, Remembering UGA interview with Mr. Terry Wingfield, conducted by Fran at the Ray Nicholson House on the UGA campus in Athens, Georgia on May 27, 2009. Terry, we don't have to search for a beginning to your days in Athens because your days began in Athens, didn't they? You were an Athens boy.
They did. I'm one of the few native Athenians. Fran, you hear the story all the time though when they say like one of your previous interviews with Upshaw Bentley. Upshaw wasn't born in Athens, so he can't claim to be a native Athenian. So, when he dies, he can't say I was native Athenian. He said, although I've lived in Athens for the last 90 years perhaps, I still am not a native Athenian.
That's right.
And I am one of those.
That's a great label for us, isn't it?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about family life and growing up in Athens.
Well, I was born at the old St. Mary's Hospital on Millage Avenue and in 1929, and Athens at that time was just a little small university town. Basically, there was very little in the way of any kind of manufacturing. They had a manufacturing company, and Athens Manufacturing Company was the only two I can remember as commercial, I guess you'd say, employers in Athens. University was the main employer, but Athens was a great little town to live in. We had as a little boy, we had very few toys to play with, so we made our own toys. I can recall one toy I made that was an interesting little toy. My mama did some sewing, so I would take her wooden spool and cut little tracks in the sides of the wooden spool that was empty of thread, of course, and I would take a knife, pocket knife, and I would cut a little groove on one end of the spool and put a match in that. The match that broke off just exactly the width of the spool, and put a rubber band through that, and then on the other end, put a piece of wax off the top of a candle on the side, and then put a match that was long enough to hit the floor on the other side with a rubber band in the middle, and you put that down, and you could have a tractor, and it would roll, and you'd race tractors. We used to play pick up sticks, which was a fun game for us back in those days, and we'd pick a yard that had a walkway in the middle, and we'd cut sticks about 2 feet long and pile them on each end of the yard, and we'd go steal a stick and the other guy's pile, and as soon as we got back across the walkway, we were free. We put that stick into our pile, and it'd go back and forth, and if he tackled me, he got the stick and he put it back in his pile. So we played that until somebody got all the sticks.
Broke the arm.
Well, nicks and scrapes back in those days were common. You just went home and Mama would wash them off a little bit and tell you to go to bed.
You didn't wear a helmet back then,
no, did you? No, such things as a helmet. No, we just played rough and tough. And girls played with us. We had girls play with us. We tackled a girl too. It didn't make any difference. We played roll of the bat. Henderson Avenue is where I grew up, and we had a lot of interesting people on Henderson Avenue, but we played roll of the bat, which was always we hit the ball and it'd go out in the field. If anybody had to roll, they'd roll it back. If they hit the bat, it was their bat. And we didn't have any toys to play with. We just all played with each other and had good times.
My mama, we lived in a house on Prince Avenue when I was a little bitty, and all the boys were in the neighborhood. It was just boys. And they didn't like me playing with them much, but they would let me play roll hit the bat.
Yeah.
And I was pitching one day, little bitty girl, and got slammed right in the chest, knocked my breath out. And my mama said, if you can't play with the boys, come on in the house. So she was embarrassed that her girl baby would not be able to stand up to the roll hit the bat crowd.
But you had a good time playing with the boys.
I
did.
I did.
It was fun.
Talk to us a little bit about the physical appearance of Athens, Terry. What do you remember about downtown Athens?
Well, downtown Athens I remember as being really, one feature was the wide sidewalks, and they're still there on Broad Street. But Athens had, well, I remember Bernstein Funeral Home was right downtown Athens. Athens Hardware was on the corner of, Thomas and Broad. And Farmers Hardware was right on the corner on the point. Warren J. Smith Drugstore was on the other corner, opposite, across from Athens Hardware. And my granddaddy had a grocery store down on the next corner down. I can't remember what that street was, next corner down on Broad Street. Started off, he had a grocery store there years and years until the Depression came along and they lost out. But all of the automobile dealerships were downtown. Warren Thurman had a Buick dealership where the National Bank is now, or the SunTrust Bank. And Grady Henson had a Cadillac dealership on the other corner, along with a little Sinclair, I believe it was, service station on the corner where the parking lot for the C&S Bank is. And of course, the Holman Hotel was on the other corner. And the C&S Bank was not on where it is now. It was in the first floor of the Southern Mutual Building. And we had theaters. The Palace Theater was right directly across the street from the Southern Mutual Building, and then the Georgia Theater is where it is today, but it's a disco type thing now. And then they had the Strand Theater that we call a rat hole when I was in school, because there were some invaders in the place because all the popcorn is on the floor. But
that was down on Broad Street, down behind the arch.
That was down on Broad Street, on down below the arch, towards Thomas Street.
Right.
And but there really were some clothing stores and a couple of jewelry stores, and I remember a flower store there. Ms. Busey ran one, and Van Cleve ran one. Stores down there on Clayton Street, Cress's, Woolworths, so forth. All those things basically are gone now.
Yeah.
But back then, it was fun to go downtown Athens. I remember they had a young man that had a little newsstand on the corner of Clayton and College Avenue, and had a young man in there that shined shoes. Best shoe shine I ever got in my life was in that little place on the corner there. Red was his name, that shined shoes. Great guy. And we sort of stood in line and did that. And you could look out the window. I could look out my window in Southern Mutual Building and look at and see the arch. So I could see most all of what was the university at that time. The only thing we had across in the so-called South Campus, I guess you'd call it now, were the agricultural schools and so forth, but everything was on the North Campus when I was in school there. And it was all centralized right there around the library was where the president's office now is, and so forth. But downtown Athens has changed now. There's not much down there now that was down there, regrettably.
That's for sure.
And I tell you, you don't want to go down there at night if you can help it.
That's for sure. You mentioned Mr. Upshaw Bentley, and we talked about Bear School. Were there two elementary schools in Athens at the time?
Chase Street School.
Chase and Barra?
Chase and Barra. I don't remember anything. Gaines School Road came in later on.
I think Chase and Barra. Was College Avenue School there then? At that time, there was a little...
Fran, I don't remember College Avenue School being active when I was a boy, but that I don't remember. I really don't remember about that. But everything was centralized from, if you went down Millage Avenue or Lumpkin Street or downtown, that was just about it as far as Athens was concerned. As I think I've told you, the Broad Street was a little two-lane road, and it stopped out there along about where the river was. There was really nothing beyond the river at all.
You were on your way to Atlanta then,
You were on your way to Atlanta, and there wasn't any reason to stop out there unless you stopped at, well, there was no place to stop out there. Potts Barbecue wasn't out there. Potts Barbecue was back over on Oglethorpe Avenue, but it was in the country back in those days. Broad Street, Baxter Street stopped at Rock Springs. It didn't go further on out. And there was a airport that a retired Major Garner had a little airport out there on the corner of what is now Baxter Street and Alps Road, where the Kroger Shopping Center is now. And there was an airport, a small little airport, and not many planes could get in there except Piper Cub. And I had an experience out there one time, Fran, that could have been disastrous, I guess you'd say. But I had a friend who could fly, but he couldn't take passengers. So I took him out to the airport, and he rented a plane, a little Piper Cub, and your little side would drop off on the side, and you just open the airplane. And he rented that Cub, and he landed out at Garner's field, and Garner wasn't there. And he landed, and I got in the plane with him, and we flew around Athens, having a good time flying around, and we both had dates, and they were in the car by a little shack he had down there. So we thought, well, we're gonna scare the girls, so we flew towards them, but we flew towards them from Rock Springs back this way, and came back up and went over the top of the corner of Alps Road and Broadwood. Up they had Charlie Upchurch had a little restaurant there on the corner. We flew up over the top of Charlie's restaurant, and I said, you know, we're not scaring those girls very bad because they can see us coming from a good ways. Let's go back the other way and let's come over Uppies, and then we'll dive down towards them and scare them as we come across the top of that little old barn house he had there. That's a good idea, we'll do that. So we did, but going downwind in a Piper Cub doesn't produce much uplift when you're trying to get back up in the air again. So as luck would have it, we hit the ground, but we hit it hard enough to bounce back up in the air, and we took back off again, and I was scared to death, and I looked down by the side. I took my head out the window and looked down there and saw the wheel was just running this way, and it was flat. This side, the wheel was flat on this side, running this way. They weren't down like they were supposed to be, and he was flying, and I said, look here. So we said, well, we got to get it down some way. We did, and I was in the ROTC, and my daddy told me that you wreck it, you pay for it. So I never did get any money from the ROTC. My daddy took those checks, and I paid for an airplane for a good number of years.
Terry, we're just glad you're here with us today. Goodness gracious.
I had a lot of jobs back when I was a little boy. Fran, I'll tell you about one job I had when I was a little boy. I say we were depression children, and so everybody had to pitch in and try to make some money for the family. And Dr. Welch, I was a sickly little old boy, and I had what they call a streptococcus throat back in those days. And Dr. Welchel was an old timer and lived next door to me, and he said, if you want to get that boy well, just tell him not to wear any shoes as long as he can. So I would go barefooted all summer long, and then I'd keep on barefooted later on. And I got me a magazine route, and I had a pouch, and I sold Ladies' Home Journal and Saturday Evening Post, and don't remember what else much, but I had a pouch, and I'd go down Millage Avenue, and I didn't sell them much on Henderson Avenue because everybody knew me, but I'd go down Millage Avenue on close to the 5 Points and so forth, and I'd knock on doors, and it would be cold, 32 degrees, so I'd be barefooted, and I'd knock on the door, and a lady come to the door, and she'd say, what do you want? And I said, ma'am, I'm selling magazines, and if you'd like to see if you need any magazines, I have a Saturday Evening Post, and I have a Ladies' Home Journal, and so forth. And I said, wish you'd buy some, and she'd look down and see me barefooted, and she'd say, little boy, don't you have any shoes? And I said, no, ma'am. And she'd say, how many magazines do you have? I said, well, I have 3 left. I'll just buy all 3 of them. So I led the sales in the southeast of magazines for several years.
Oh, barefoot magazine sales.
Barefoot magazine. At the same time, I was working at the YMCA, which was where the Holiday Inn is now. And we had a pool there. And you came in the front door of the YMCA, and you checked in, and you bought a little tag, and you'd go downstairs and get a towel. And I was the towel boy at the Y when I was a teenager, or a young, I guess younger than teenager really. And that was a 10 cents. You get 10 cents, you could swim and bathe and work out, play handball, whatever you wanted to do for 10 cents back in those days. That was a good job.
You were the most energetic, motivated young man. Tell us a little bit about your job with Lamar Dodd. Terry.
Well, I had Mr. Dodd put an ad in the paper advertising for someone to come model for him. And I didn't really hardly knew what modeling was, but it was a job. And I think I started working for him in about 42, 41, 42, I don't remember. But I have a portrait in my house that's dated 1943. And I think it was, I'd been working for him for a while, but that one was done. But he asked me, he said, "Can you stand still?" And I said, "Mr. Dodd, I can do whatever I need to do for money." And I said, "I need to work," because I had a girl's bicycle and I'd had enough fights about that. And I thought it's time I tried to get me a boy's bicycle. And so I wanted to work to get me a boy's bicycle. And so Mr. Dodd said, "If you can stand still, and I'll give you a chance." So I worked for him and had on a little old bathing suit that was a small bathing suit, but it covered me up. I wasn't a nude model. I was just a young boy. But anyway, I worked for him for a good number of years, and one time I remember the girls and the boys in the art class, most of them were girls, in the art classes Mr. Dodd had would make portraits of me, and I would stand in different positions and so forth. A lot of the portraits were just torso, and they give the portraits to me when they got through with them, and so I'd take them home, and Mama would like some of them, Mama wouldn't like some others, and she had one that she thought was a pretty good portrait, so she said to me, said, if you don't mind, if you take this back over to school and get the girl who did this to paint a shirt on you, because my mom didn't like me being naked at the top, so I said yes, and so I took it back over there, and I asked Mr. Dodd, I said, "Mr. Dodd, I've got this portrait that Mama likes, but she doesn't like me not to have a shirt on. I wonder if you'd get one of the students to put a shirt on me." And Mr. Dodd said, "Give it to me." And that class hadn't started. And in less than 30 seconds, he put a shirt on me. And so I carried it back home and told my mama. She said, "Well, who put the shirt?" I said, "Mr. Dodd." She said, "Ooh, that's great." She said, "We've got a Lamar Dodd shirt in our house then." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, we got a Lamar Dodd shirt." But those were good old days. He would take me with him, Fran. He'd go lecture at Wesleyan in Macon and Agnes Scott are two places I remember particularly. And he'd come by my house and pick me up, and we'd go to Macon or to Atlanta, and he would use me as his model, and I'd have to. Mr. Dodd was great in what he would do. He would try to, even though I was a little boy, he would try to make me do certain things that would make different muscles do different positions in you, whether it be your torso or your leg, your hip, or whatever type of thing and so forth, your thigh, and your arm, your biceps, and so on and so forth. And he would show the students different ways you would draw that particular muscle that would make sense to him. And so he would position me as he wanted me to be, and then he would lecture to the students and so forth, and then we'd change positions and so forth. And it was great for me because he was picking up a little boy at 9 o'clock in the morning, say, and bring me back home at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon after driving 4 hours on the road, and I was getting paid by the hour. And so it's good to sit in the car and drive Mr. Dodd for 4 hours and get paid and listen to his story at the same time, which was fantastic.
And you got a boy's bike.
And I got a boy's bike. That's
right.
Great.
Got
a boy's bike. It was used, but it was a boy's bike.
What a great story, though. Talk a little bit, Terry, about you went to Bear School.
At the Bear School.
Talk a little bit about Bear. Did you walk to school?
Yes, I did. I walked to school. I lived on Henderson, I say, and there was an alley going from Henderson over to Baxter, right in front of my house. And then I could walk down Bloomfield all the way to Lumpkin, and the school was right there behind Lumpkin. So on Pinecrest.
Well,
so
Barrow was a pretty new school, and
yeah.
I mean, it was what, just several years old then when you were there?
Yeah, it was. We thought it was brand new. I did, because it was a nice school, and we had some interesting teachers. I remember Miss Rosa Maddox, I think, was my first grade teacher, and she was a sweet lady. And then Martha Smith taught me, I think, the fifth grade, as I remember, and I was always devoted to Martha, who died not too long ago. She was a magnificent lady. And a lady named Miss Flanagan was the principal, as I recollect, back in those days. And but we had a good time at Barrow Street School. We played marbles, and it was a class. When we didn't get credit for it, but it was a, I guess you'd call it a sports opportunity or something in school. And there was a rotunda in the middle of the school, wings on each side of it, and we'd draw a circle and play ring marbles, put a cross in the middle and put marbles all along the cross, and you'd stand anywhere outside the circle and you'd shoot at the marble with your shooter, and you'd try to knock marbles out of the circle, and if your shooter stayed in the circle, you got to shoot again. So you kept shooting until you either your shooter went out of the circle or you didn't knock a marble out of the circle. So it was an interesting thing, and then we had tournaments at the. I won the Barrow Street School ring marble contest, and I was the champion there. And so then we had tournaments at the old YMCA on outside towards the Cain Firehouse. We had a big cement place back then. They draw a ring there, and we had the tournament there from all schools in town come down, and. I used to claim I was the Athens champion, but some people disputed that fact, so I'm not going to say I was.
Oh.
I thought I was. I told my mama I was anyway.
Tell me, at that time, Terry, you went to Hills. Did you say there's a middle school that you went to?
Yes, there was a junior high school off of Prince Avenue.
Was it Child Street?
Yeah, on Child Street, that's right. And Patty Hillsman was the principal of that school, and Miss Patty and her sister lived next door to me on Henderson Avenue, and we had some interesting teachers there. I'll name one lady that taught us that we had a lady named Miss Heidler, Miss Florence Heidler, and Miss Heidler wore a little visor on her head when she taught. It was like a poker player out in Las Vegas, and she had that little visor on her head, and she was an amazing lady, and you didn't misbehave much in Miss Florence Heidler's class because she could throw a eraser, and she could have been a major league baseball player pitcher because she could throw an eraser, and sometimes we thought it was a curve eraser because it'd curve around somebody, hit somebody who was talking in the back row. So you didn't do a whole lot of talking in her class, but she was a good teacher, a great lady. I enjoyed her. But we used to always sort of see Miss Heidler, you can't hit me if I'm ducking behind him. And she'd say, don't give me a chance, because I can too. So, and she'd wrap your knuckles with a ruler if you were talking. So it's tough to get through junior high school. You had to be tough to get through junior high.
Well, then did you go across the street to
Athens High School?
Prince Avenue?
Went across the street to Athens High School, and loved Athens High School. Athens High School was they had a male auditorium was next door, and we had an old gym that was changed when I was in high school. They built what we call the new gym. It's not much of a new gym now. It's an old dilapidated building, but and then had a baseball field, an ROTC drill field next door where the house is they brought back from the Stone Mountain. I don't remember the name of the house, but it's crossing the side of the fire hall. It was on the point. The fire hall was right there on the point of Prince Avenue and Hill Street. And behind it, we had a drugstore called PA Pharmacy. And if you were a gambler, you could sneak out of school and go across the PA Pharmacy and get a Coca-Cola or something squirt or whatever they used to call them back in those days. And but if you got caught, you'd have to do something after school because that was against the rules except after school. But we played baseball on that field for years. Wonderful. We had a good time. I was one of my favorite folks in the world back in those days was a fellow named Sarge Farmer, Leon Farmer's daddy. And Sarge was a ROTC director, and he was the sort of guy that all the boys, if they got in trouble with the principal or the teacher or anybody else, or got in trouble with anybody else, even might have gotten in trouble a little bit with the judge in downtown Athens at the city court. But anyway, Sarge was our confidant. We could always go to Sarge Farmer, and Sarge Farmer would be our buddy, and he would try to take up for us. And he'd go to the teachers and say, well, that boy's not such a bad boy after all. You let him get by with this one thing. And the second time we'd get in trouble, he'd say, let him get by with this one thing. I said, Sarge, he's been in trouble 3 times. You keep saying this time. And Sarge said, well, I'm just looking after my boy. He was a great guy.
Early influences, and it sounds like Sarge was one, wasn't he?
He was one, yeah. Sarge
and you mentioned the
guy.
Y, Terry. We hear so much about the huge influence that the YMCA had on young men in Athens. Can you speak to that a minute? Yeah,
when I was working there, the director was Henry Clay Pop Pearson, and Pop was just wonderful to me. And I say, the Y was, you know, back in those days, YMCA was exclusively boy. There wasn't anything such thing as girls, and we didn't want to get or Pop didn't want to get the drain stopped up, so you couldn't swim with any bathing suits on. You swim skinny, and we used to have a good time at the YMCA, and years. We had a lot of city people came down there and played handball, and had handball courts and had boxing back then. We used to have boxing matches, and the basketball court was a court in the bottom, but then around the top of it had sort of what they thought was a running track, but people didn't do much running on that track. They just sat up there for boxing matches and basketball games and things like that at the Y, and had a nice field behind there. And I have got members of that football field in the back there, because I got all my teeth knocked out in playing football back there one time. As you say, there's no such thing as helmets, and my mama wasn't a very happy soldier, but we got them patched a little bit. YMCA was a wonderful place for folks to gather back. Holiday Inn's there now, of course, but it was a great place. And then, of course, the YMCA camp in the mountains, I got to go up there because I was working, I say, as a tower boy down at the Y, off and on with Mr. Darden, and I got to go to the Athens YMCA camp as a leader, and he paid me $25 to go up there for 10 weeks. We'd go up there 2 weeks before camp opened and work, and then go 8 weeks for the camp session. And we didn't, I guess maybe during the 10 weeks I might have gone home maybe twice. We had to hitchhike home. Didn't have any way to get home except thumbing. And but Athens YMCA camp was a wonderful influence on me. To this day I remember the Y camp very, very vividly, and wonderful memories of Athens Y camp. Learned a lot of things, and it had some good things I recall. And I'm talking too much, perhaps, Fran, but I remember one little boy I had that was going to be adopted, and the decision to adopt him was going to be made whether or not we could straighten out some of his habits. He never had his teeth brushed, he'll brush his hair and stuff like that. He was about 45 years old. And they sent him to Athens Y camp to see if we could sort of straighten him out and get him. He was living just like an animal, more or less. And he came up there, and he was in my, Papa assigned him to me, and I had 2 other boys in my cabin. It was just a small cabin, 3 boys. And John Simpson was one of the boys in my. John was 5 years old when he came in, and he took this young boy under his wing too. And we always felt good about the fact because they did adopt the boy, and he came to turn out to be a real nice young man. And I met him several times later at the Y camp reunion and so forth.
Making a difference, truly making a difference. I feel that way about the girls' Y.
Mm-hmm.
Terry.
I'm sure.
Let's go on and talk a little bit then about college years. Tell us a little bit about what we've talked about Athens, and you mentioned campus. Talk a little bit specifically about campus. You said mostly it's North Campus was campus. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And I was in the ROTC and advanced ROTC at Georgia. I was in the cavalry and the so-called tank corps, and we had a barn that housed the tanks. We only had 2 tanks, as I remember, but we had 2 tanks, and we housed them over in a barn right off where the River Road is, and we used to practice driving those tanks, those hot gun tanks. We drive those, and we drove them all around where the Ramsey Center is now. That was just country, of course. But there was nothing basically over on that side. There was no Georgia Center. Where the Georgia Center is now was after the war, that was a trailer park that students lived in, where the Georgia Center is now. And some of those dormitories were there, girls' dormitories were there, over on the so-called South Campus, I guess you'd say. But the school basically stopped just before you get Willer. The boys used to play football. Football practice and so forth was down where Stegman Hall is, or where it used to be, where the new learning center situation is. That was the football practice field and the baseball field. There were stands that were circular stands back towards the Zell Miller Learning Center now. And the boys played practice football down there, and they all lived over across from the cemetery. All the football players lived over across from the cemetery. I think Cain Hall sticks in my mind. Mm-hmm. And but they used to practice in a little field there across from the Memorial Hall, and back on the baseball field. But there was no such thing as practice fields where they are in Butts Mill building and so on and so forth. I don't remember anything being on the other, beyond towards 5 Points from there, past what those student houses, they were just, trailers is all I can call them. I call them trailer mobile homes, what you want to call them.
The prefabs, I know, well, back there at some point they put the prefabs in, didn't they? Those prefabricated houses over there on South Campus to house some of those folks coming back on the GI Bill, or the.
Those were probably, I don't remember, Fran. Those were just strictly trailers that were there where the Georgia Center is. I had a cousin who lived there that I had some problem with from time to time. I was in business, a young man in business, and he came to my office one day and he said, Terry, I went down to the National Bank to borrow some money and they wouldn't loan me any money. Said, but if you would endorse my note, they would be glad to loan me $50. And nobody ever asked me to endorse a note before, and I didn't know what that meant particularly. So I went down to the bank, and Mr. Evans Johnson, and I put my signature on the back of that thing, and about 3 months later, Mr. Evans stuck that old long finger out, and he said, come here, Terry. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Evans, what do you need? He said, you remember you endorsed that note, don't you? And I said, yes, sir, I remember that. I'm glad to do that. He said, well, he didn't pay it, you got to. And I said, Mr. Evans, I ain't got any money. I can't pay $50. I'll pay you $5 a month as long as I can to get it paid. And I went to his house, he was living in those trailers. And I went to his house and I grabbed him he came to the door and I grabbed him by the neck and I said, I'm finna to kill you for $50. And he said, please don't kill me, I'm gonna give you this dog. Just let me give you this dog. And I couldn't feed my wife, much less the dog. But that's what I remember about those trailers over there. I do remember that.
One of those life lessons, wasn't it?
Right.
North Campus, did it look then the way it looks now?
There really wasn't,
pretty much,
wasn't much change. The library was where the president's office is now. Brooks Hall was there. That's where I went to school. I majored in real estate and insurance, and Brooks Hall was there. The law school was a small building, sort of across from there. Of course, the Phi Kappa and other halls were there, and the pharmacy school was there where the co-op was. But really all together. That everything was done. And we took classes in the administration building and also in the building down below it, going towards
New College. You're talking about Terrell Hall.
Probably Terrell Hall. Yeah, probably Terrell Hall. We took classes down there.
Meg's Hall, maybe one of those.
Meg's Hall was a small school, but it basically I really don't know there's a great deal of change except they've added on to all the buildings, of course. But it's basically when you first enter the campus from the arch, right and left for a while, it to me is pretty much like it was.
Same thing.
Same thing now. I don't see a whole lot of difference between but all the additions have gone on of course, out further back.
Right.
Towards the gully, what I used to call the gully down there where Broad Street, where the football field is and so forth.
George Marshall said Sputnik changed the campus. He said Sputnik is what brought on all the science centers and all those
Well,
things.
I guess that's right. All those things came in. But they've expanded out now, you know.
Oh.
And who would ever would have believed that they're going to have a softball field out there on Milledge Avenue? I mean, if somebody had told me that when I was a little boy, I'd have said, well, somebody better take him back in right now. Put him in with a suit.
How many students were in school when you were in school? Do you remember?
I went to school when the veterans were coming back. Mm-hmm. I went to school in the fall of '46, and we had probably some 8,000 students maybe at that time, and it just of course some of the veterans that came back from the war. I joined the Kappa Alpha fraternity, and it was right across the street from the First Methodist Church, and I used to have to take my mama out the side door of the Methodist Church instead of the door towards the KA house, because some of those veterans were back from the war and they weren't too interested in learning anything much. They were sort of interested in getting a GI Bill and having a good time, and they used to sunbathe on the porch above the front door of the KA house there on Hancock. And my mama didn't think people ought to be sunbathing without any shirts on Sunday morning during church service, and so I take her out by the other direction.
A wise man.
Yes.
A wise man. You were a business major then?
I was a business major. Took business from A. Aldo Charles, who was in charge of the real estate and insurance department at the business school. And there was a fellow named Glenn Sutton, who taught finance, and amazingly smart man. If I know anything about stocks or so forth now, it's because I got a beginning from him. He was a really smart guy. Lived over on Oglethorpe Avenue. He was really a great guy. I remember him in high school, in college.
What other faculty or staff inspired you, or just characters? Terry, I think we had more than our share of characters, maybe. But who
had more than our share of what?
Characters.
Oh, we did. Yeah, I went through the Pope Hill era. You maybe have heard of Pope Hill. Pope Hill was really a good guy, but he had the theory that probabilities was his thing, and his idea was that if you throw a chalk, this is a true story, if you throw a chalk out the window in his class, that one of these days that chalk is going to come back in the window. It's a probability. And we all say, yeah. Well, we set him up, of course, and you might imagine, and we had a fellow who was cut class that day, and Professor Hill threw that piece of chalk out the window, and we were all sitting there. Next thing, that piece of chalk came right back in the window again, and Pope Hill stood there and looked at that chalk on the floor, and everybody looked at each other, and so he said, I told y'all it would happen. And we knew what had happened. He was a nice guy.
How about one that everybody talks about, Dean Tate?
Oh, me. Dean Tate, what a great guy. I remember when I went to sign up for the University of Georgia to get in Georgia, I walked down Baxter Street from my house, and registration was going on down in the Stegman Hall, and I walked in and was looking around. I didn't know what to do, anything, and Dean Tate looked at me and he said, "You that Wingfield boy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, get in that line right there, you in the University of Georgia. And I got in that line, like he said, and I was in the University of Georgia. I don't remember even having any money in my pocket. I was in Georgia. I knew that. I started taking class after that. Dean Tate was always good to me. He lived on Daring, which is not too far from me, and I used to visit down that direction from time to time. Great guy.
He's the one that I think everybody remembers.
Well, he was always there. And Dean Tate was another one. If you got in trouble, Dean Tate would try to help you. He really was. He was a great guy to the boys. Boys loved him, and we had a good time teasing him from time to time. Wild Bill, we called him Wild Bill, of course. But he was a wonderful person and really did love his boys. He looked after boys. Had a cap, a wet cap, and married to a wonderful gal, Sue Fran. And I say they lived down on Daring, and I have very fond memories of Dean Tate in college.
You mentioned the Cain house. Talk about the social life at the University of Georgia, and maybe a little bit about the Greek life here. How was it?
Well, Greek life was really was really about the only way we had entertainment to amount to anything, and then. Of course, the dances were wonderful. We had dances, we had little commencement, and little commencement was a great thing. It usually had a band. It was a big name band, and we had dances on Friday night and dances again on Saturday night, and on Saturday afternoon, usually we had a concert in Fine Arts Auditorium, and that was wonderful. And of course, the dances were great because back in those days, we wouldn't let our fraternity brothers, the young ones, the pledges, we wouldn't let them have a date, go to the little commencement, because they had to come and they had to be in the stag line. And if you go out there and dance, and you dancing around with a young girl, and you get sort of tired of talking to her, and naturally you haven't even finished the whole dance with her, and you do a finger like this behind her back, and that meant to one of the pledges to come break on you and let you go someplace else. And so stag lines, we usually had a long stag line at dances, all dances, not just little commencement. Any dance we had, fraternity dances and anything else, we had the stag line. And those, all the pledges, not just the K's, but the SAs and Chi Phi's, all of them had to have their stag lines. And you didn't get stuck in it. You didn't dance with the same, nowadays they go to a dance with a girl, they dance with the same girl all night long. Gosh, we wouldn't have thought about doing that. There were so many pretty girls, we wouldn't have a chance to meet them all. But that social life was really centered around the fraternities and sororities. And we went to each other's fraternities and sorority parties. And
were the parties at the house, or were they at Woodruff Hall? Where did you?
No, most of the parties were at the house, fraternity houses.
And was it a record player? Did you have a band?
Well, we usually had a band of sorts. You always had somebody in the fraternity always could play a piano, or you wouldn't call them band. I wouldn't call them anything, but they would just. I don't remember record players. I remember boys playing the piano, and some boys playing the piano, some boys playing a guitar and things of that nature. But they usually were fraternity boys that played, and it was a fun. Nowadays they can't have a function at the university fraternity house and so without alcohol being involved. Back in those days, all we wanted to do was have fun and meet girls. That's the way I met my wife. I was, the Sigma Chi's had what they call a Sigma Chi Derby. And we all fraternities went to the Sigma Chi Derby. Not many girls went except the sorority girls that had to go. But I was standing out in the group watching the Sigma Chi Derby, and they were parading the girls around who were going to be the contestants for the Queen, or what they called her, and then the Modern Venus. And they were measuring this young girl up there who was representing the Fine Muse, and they were measuring her, and I sort of liked the appearance, and so I kicked one of my pledge brothers standing next to me. I said, "You know her?" And he said, "Yeah, I know her." I said, "She went to school in Atlanta." I said, "I know her." And I said, "Well, get me a date with her tonight or this weekend anyway." And girls all lived out at Coordinate Campus, which was out where the Navy School is now. And he said, "Oh, she's not going to date you. She's in love with the tech man." And I said, "Well, I take care of tech folks, so you just see what you can do." So I finally got a date with her. And finally ended up walking it down the aisle.
I was going to say it must have worked out.
Wasn't much. I got rid of that tech fellow in a hurry. I chucked him out the door in a hurry.
Oh my. What? At high school and college too, Terry. What were the local hangouts? You mentioned Uppies.
Yeah, we used to hang around. 5 Points was at high school. There was no place to hang out much for high school boys, and we used to hang around. Found there was a head service station, was at the corner of 5 Points and right in the corner there, where the coffee house is now. And we used to congregate there at nighttime, and just tell lies and talk about things that are going on in the town and who's met who girl and type thing and so forth and what was going on but we hung out there, and then we hung out at Cody David's out at Normal Town. He had a drugstore out there next to Normal Hardware, and we would go out to we'd also coordinate campus. I say had the girls out there, and I remember we used to go out there, and the girls had certain nights they could go out and had to be back in at a certain time. But you could always throw pebbles up to windows if you knew where your girlfriend or somebody you wanted to meet was staying, and you throw pebbles up there, and they would open the window and you could stand on the ground and talk to them. That was about all you could do. But we used to spend some time doing it, walk out to. First date I ever had with a girl out at Normal Town was not my wife, but first date I ever had going together. I had rode my bicycle out there, and college girl. She was wanting to know where the car was, and I said, "You don't have a car." I said, "Bicycle?" I said, "Bicycle. We either gonna stay here or we're gonna ride that bike." That's all I got. We didn't have many cars in fraternities back in those days.
How did you get around?
Walked, or rode a bicycle, or hitchhiked. Girls wouldn't hitchhike now for anything in the world. But back when I was in school and girls were in college, they hitchhiked by the droves. I mean, you go down Millage Avenue in front of the fraternity house and sorority house and so forth, and you could pick up a car load of girls going to college in a minute if you had a car. I didn't ever have a car much, but so I didn't get to do much of that carpooling with girls. But that's where everybody got around town back in those days, hitchhiking or walking or riding a bike.
Were there buses, trolleys?
We had trolleys were phasing out by the time I got there. Trolleys. I don't remember trolleys at all in high school days or college days. I don't remember any trolleys or buses even back then. We had buses off and on. Buses were always have been a controversy in Athens, as you know, because they don't make any money. And but we didn't. The trolleys were gone. I knew about the trolleys, and I remember the trolleys when I was a little boy, but I don't remember trolleys in high school or college at all.
You've tried to find a good friend with a car, though, right?
You sure right about that. The most popular boys in school, boys had cars. You didn't have to be a nice guy. You could be a bad guy and still have a lot of friends if you had a car.
Talk to me a little bit about campus politics of the day, Terry. Do you remember what? It seems to me that there was a Greek party and an independent party at some point. Was that?
Fran, I don't really remember a lot about that. As I say, my father, I was actually a sophomore, I guess, in college when my daddy got sick, and he was running an insurance and mortgage banking business and by himself. And when he got sick in 1948, back in those days, man had a heart attack. He was through working, and so he was through working basically. Dr. Walter told him to not do anything. As a matter of fact, nearly a year later, he stayed in the bed for nearly a year, and a year later, I took him down to Florida to live in. But I started working, so I didn't really have a lot of involvement with politics in college or anything else in college. I was trying to learn the business and try to make a living and send my daddy a little check every once in a while and try to learn something. But that's what got me. Daddy had a pretty good little business, and I remember, and I told you earlier today that probably the guy that I remember most about when I was a young businessman trying to get started was Bill Hartman. My daddy had one little room office in the Southern Mutual building, and and another office next door came vacant, no more office, and I didn't have enough money to rent it, but I wanted some space to have a little private office if I could. So we had, Bill Hartman and I, put a wall right down the middle of that office, and I had one side and Bill had the other side, and we didn't have much with it. We were able to keep secrets because we didn't have a wall. It was about 7 feet high, I guess, and over the top of the wall was a light fixture, right in the middle, over the hall and over the wall, and I was the lucky one. I had the switch for the light on my half of the wall, so anytime Coach Hartman had to work in weekends or night or something, he had to call me, and I'd have to come downtown and turn the light on for him. So I finally gave him a key. But he was a wonderful person, and Fran, in my opinion, I've always said that Coach Bill Hartman, presidents of the university came and president of the university went. Coach Hartman, from the day he walked on this campus until the day he died, the University of Georgia was something he continuously thought about and worked for and talked about. And I can tell you, I know from experience that Coach Hartman probably is responsible for raising more money for the University of Georgia than any other one person I can think of, or certainly I never met anybody that did it like he did it. And I remember he was close to Mr. Bernie Ramsey, and they would go off on football trips, and Bill was coaching. They'd go off on football trips, and Coach Hartman would call Bernie Ramsey in New York and say, the game plan today is going to be such and such, and so on and so forth, and if you're going to listen to the game, back in those days was very little television, but if you listen to the ball game, that you hear a play we're going to run, it's going to be this, that, or the other type thing, and so forth. He kept Bernie Ramsey involved in Georgia football for years, and I probably credit Bill Hartman more than anybody else in the world for getting the Ramsey son in Athens and all that Mr. Ramsey did for the University of Georgia. I think Bill Hartman was responsible for it. He got me involved in the Tech Georgia Foundation, and I didn't want to have anything to do with Georgia Tech, but Coach Hartman told me that I didn't have to worry about giving anything to Georgia Tech. Just get on that board and try to help them. So I did because of him. Remarkable person, and I guess I'd have to call it an honor, but it was also a sad situation. But Coach Hartman asked me to be a pallbearer in Ruth's funeral when she died, and his family asked me to be a pallbearer when Coach Hartman died, and those were two good friends of mine. They lived in the little apartments that my daddy built right after the war behind my house, and Coach Hartman and Ruth lived there for a good number of years, and another interesting guy who lived there was Porter Payne. Porter lived there with his wife Martha, and Billy Payne was born in those apartments, and Martha used to fuss at me every time I go get the rent from her. She'd fuss at me and said, "Look at there, look at Billy on the floor down there, that red floor down there, painted red, a concrete floor painted red." So he's just washing it all up with his diapers. And his diapers are about as red as they could be. But
he wasn't a silver britches early on then.
Those weren't silver britches, they were red britches then. They were red britches, is right.
I think absolutely what you've said about Coach Hartman. I think there are so many people who appreciated him so much and felt a tie to the university because of him.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
Just an amazing man, and this project started the month after we finally got up and running, the month after Coach Bill died, and we just hated to miss out because he did have some wonderful stories.
Oh, he could fill you full of stories, all right, and they were all true. Don't care what he said, you wouldn't cross him. We used to try to laugh about him sometimes. We had lunch many Saturdays for several years and years before he died, and on Saturday. And Coach Hartman and Julius Bishop used to get together and those things, and Julius would question him about something Say, well, oh, Bill, that wasn't in 38, that was in 36. Well, we'd go to scratching around trying to find the facts, and Bill was always right. It used to make jurists mad. We had a little group of people, and it was some real power brokers back in those days. It was Julius and Bill Hartman and a bunch of others that were in the group. We had what we call the Oneida Street Athletic Club, which was a wonderful organization. It was out in John Wilkins he ran a plant out there on Oneida Street, and he had a building he wasn't doing anything with. So he agreed if we'd all pitch in and help him, he would put a steam room in there and put a little workout room and two little cots in there to take a nap on and so forth. And we'd go out there and meet, and in the afternoons, everybody would gather there in the afternoons and take a steam bath and talking. And I was there one day, and Julius and Coach Hartman were there, and they were telling stories, Julius, about how he used to pitch against Spud Chandler, and not Spud Chandler, all kind of folks. Dizzy Dean. He used to pitch against Dizzy Dean. He'd tell his stories, and Coach Hartman started telling his escapades about how great a football player he was and how far he could kick the ball and so on and so forth. And I was sitting listening to these two guys talk about how great they were, and I said, wait a minute, let me tell y'all something about me. And I said, when I was in high school playing football, I didn't know such thing as any loudspeakers and so forth and so on. I said, but you could read the cheerleaders' lips. When I played football and I was an end, I said, you could hear the cheerleaders saying, throw it to old Glue, throw it to old Glue, he'll score, throw it to old Glue, he'll score. And for the rest of their lives, Julius Bishop and Bill Hartman called me Old Glue, called me Old Glue. They laughed about that story because they knew it wasn't true. It didn't make any difference.
Let's talk about some of the other extracurricular things on campus, but you mentioned gridiron. We hadn't had anybody talk about gridiron. Can you talk?
You have not had anybody talk about gridiron?
Talk about gridiron. Tell us what
gridiron. Gridiron is a secret organization. Well, that's the reason they call it gridiron secret.
Well, I don't mean don't give us any secret goodies. Just tell us about it.
All I can say to you is that the Gridiron Club at the University of Georgia is certainly one of the finest organizations on this campus, and I am very proud to call myself a member of Gridiron, and glad that my oldest son, who graduated from the University of Georgia, also glad he's a member of Gridiron. It's
an honor
to be a member of Gridiron, and I would hope that future honorees will be just as happy about that honor as I am.
We will let them know that you're upholding the tenets of Gridiron's secrets. Terry, let's talk a little bit about your early professional career and days in Athens here, and I understand that you were the civil defense director in Clark County or in Athens back in the late 50s. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I was. Ralph Snow, who was mayor, asked me if I would take that job, and I accepted it, and it was interesting because it was an organizational situation more than anything else. I had to just organize people to be area directors and so forth and various things, and then had to try to organize what we're going to do about food, what we're going to do about this, that, and that. So it was just an organizational job, basically, but I enjoyed it. Was
that back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, or was it a little earlier than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was early during the Korean situation.
So we had to know where to go if the Korean, and here we are with North Korea doing what it's doing today. Had we better call you back into service?
No, I don't think they want me to come back into service, but I don't know that we were concerned about things other than the fact that we need to organize in case something did happen. Right. I don't think anybody's looking for an immediate threat.
Talking like tornadoes and anything that could happen.
Absolutely. That's right. There was anything like that was involved also.
Talk to us about the Bulldog Traveling Squad Incorporated.
Bulldog's Traveling Squad Incorporated. That's sort of something I like to forget, perhaps. Group I was bought an old bus. It was a 1950 model bus. It had about 500,000 miles on it. And we saw it and found it up in in Royston, Georgia, on a yard up there. And we had a new motor put in and one thing and another and so forth, and these are all Georgia supporters. And we were going to travel around the world on the Bulldog train. We actually incorporated, we had a charter. And so the group of us that were in it paid for the new motor, paid for all this, and we put in new 8-track tape in it, and we had all put new seats inside, and they were bench seats, part of them, and sort of long seats, part of them in the bus. And Charlie Sly painted a bulldog's head on the front of the bus, and it was a magnificent bulldog's head on the front of the bus, and on the back of the bus painted a bulldog's tail, and it had his little tail hanging out and so forth, and then had on the side it was the body of the bulldog. And so we finally got the bus all ready to go, and the first trip we were going to take, we decided we were going to go to Auburn, Mississippi State, because we're going to Mississippi State for the Mississippi State-Georgia football game in Jackson, Mississippi. So we took off and we got us a fellow who was driving for the University of Georgia at the time, one of the bus drivers for the University of Georgia. We got him to drive our bus for us, and we left Athens, and we had gotten all our stuff piled in the bus, and we got, I think we stopped the first time maybe in, I don't remember, Conyers or somewhere like that. The first time I had to put water in the bus, and because the bus was just steaming, and we drove some more and put some more water and some more antifreeze in the bus, and we kept on going. And we totally broke down in the parking lot of the Holiday Inn in Jackson, Mississippi, and the bus just blew up. Well, we didn't care, we were there, and we'd go make the game, and we had to get a ride home. We flew, all of us had to get plane tickets, and we all flew back home. We left the bus out there and then got a record to go out and get the bus and bring it back. All this costing us money, of course. Well, we thought that's wonderful, so we're going to still get it better, ready to go again, put another motor in it, and we decided this next trip we were going to take, we were going to take the girls with us. We were going to go to this was Auburn that time, and going to go to the Auburn game, and so we got everything all together, and we stopped at Posse's and got hamburgers and hot dogs and barbecue sandwiches and so forth out the Atlanta Highway, and we were getting ready to go. We were going to go to the Auburn game. Everybody was singing, the tape deck was playing, and we were all singing and having a good time and so forth. Well, we got to where the Pepsi-Cola plant is, about 2 miles from Posse's, and broke down again. So we got Betty's truck stop to come get the bus on her wrecker, or their wrecker, and pull it to stop. We all went back downtown, and everybody said, we got babysitters, and we're not going to go home. Nobody wants to go home. So we went to a friend's place, and we listened to the ball game, watched the ball game, and listened to it, and so on and so forth. And we won the ball game. And I said, boy, we're not going to miss this situation and opportunity. We called out there, I forgot what Betty's husband's name was, but we called him.
Godfrey Chanel.
Godfrey Chanel. We called Godfrey and told Godfrey, crank up your wrecker. So he cranked up the wrecker and put the bus behind the wrecker, and we drove to the airport with the bus behind the wrecker and met the team when the team flew into the Athens airport, and we pulled the wrecker. They couldn't stop us. We pulled the wrecker right out on the runway and everywhere else, and we had a good time that night. But that was nearly the end of the Bulldog Traveling Squad Incorporated, but we did fix it up again, and we were able to take it not on any trips, but we were able to take it occasionally to the stadium. That's as far as we went after our last out-of-town venture.
That's a great story.
We had a good time with that bus.
Let's go back again and talk about you, because of your dad's health, you started to work early on. You started paying the Social Security folks early on, as you say. Talk about where you went from there, and then we want to talk about the Francis Wood Wilson Foundation and your connection with them. Talk about Mr. Wilson.
Yeah. Well, about my daddy's business. My daddy started this business, and I say he got sick, and I went to work there, and that was really a wonderful job, wonderful opportunity for me, because we were in the mortgage banking business, and for many years, Fran, I would run into people and they'd say, gee whiz, I remember back in 1951 or 52 or 53 or whatever type years and so forth, and on through till I went to Atlanta. Said, you helped me buy a house. I never would have owned my own home had it not been for you, and so forth and so on. That was a real wonderful feeling to have, that I knew that I did help some folks. So I ran that business for until I decided to go to Atlanta. And during the time that my daddy was still alive and still working, he had met this man named Fred Wilson, and Mr. Fred B. Wilson was really an entrepreneur. He had done a lot of things, and I'm not going to go into what I know about his own personal life, but he was starting to develop apartments in Atlanta, and I had gone with my daddy to his office a couple of times, and when after Daddy got sick, he came to the hospital, and old St. Mary's Hospital, and I was in the room, and Mr. Wilson came in, and Daddy said, Mr. Wilson, I'm just sorry as I can be. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to try to help you with your insurance and these projects you got upcoming and so forth. And said, but I want you to know how much I appreciate your friendship and so on and so forth. And he said, Mr. Wingfield, they called each other Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wingfield. He said, Mr. Wingfield said, what's that boy going to do? And pointed at me. And Daddy said, well, I guess he's going to try to get into business. He's going to school, but he's going to try to get into the business, the insurance business and so forth with me. And he said, well, he and I get together. We'll work this out. So that was the start of my real association with Mr. Wilson. And that was probably in 50, well, my daddy died in 48. I mean, Daddy got sick in 48, so that was probably 51, maybe 49, I guess right after Daddy got sick, when Mr. Wilson was in, and I talked about it. We began to plan to write those insurance on those projects. He had apartment projects, and at one time Mr. Wilson had probably 4,000 or 5,000 apartments in Atlanta and Marietta and in Columbus, Georgia. And I wrote the insurance on them and got to really know him very well, and he was a remarkable man. I'd go to Atlanta, and he drove a Cadillac automobile, and he had a farm out there that's now part of the Atlanta Country Club out there, and he'd say, get in the car a minute, and I'd get in the car, and we'd ride, and he'd say, I want to show you these houses that I want you to put insurance on. And I said, yes, sir. And he'd get in there, and he'd ride. He'd jump terraces and one thing to other in that Cadillac and run over little pine trees and stuff like that. Scared me to death, but he didn't care if he took the motor out of it. He'd just buy another one. Didn't make any difference to him, and he was just a wonderful person, and I really did love him. And he had made arrangements to through old political friends, and he was his best friend probably was Senator Walter George, and he made arrangements through Walter George to get the small business loan for the old Henry Grady Hotel, and as a result of that, he told the man who was on the lease on the hotel at that time, said, "Now, I want to own 51% of this hotel, the lease on this hotel, and I can get you this money if you work with me." And the gentleman said, "Well, anything, I need the money." So Mr. Wilson had 51% of the Henry Grady Hotel, and all the business people downtown, of course, that was the politicians all stayed at the Henry Grady Hotel. And so he had a lot of friends like that. And I'd go to Atlanta to meet with him about insurance, and sometimes I'd walk into his office, and the secretary, Miss Pansy, sweet little lady, and she'd say, "Mr. Wilson's busy, but have a seat, and he'll be with you in just a minute." And I'd sit down. He never closed his door to his office. His office was never closed. Door was never closed in his office. He was always open. So I was sitting there I'd sit there looking at his office, and he would have people like Senator George and Colonel Duval, who was president of the Georgia Federal Savings Loan Association, and other people who were major developers and so forth that were outstanding people at the time. And they were all back there in Mr. Wilson's office, and he'd come out and get me sometime and say, "Come on in here." He'd put his arm around me, and he'd say, "I want you to meet these folks." And he'd introduce me to all these people around his table, conference table, and he said, "This boy handles my insurance." And said, "Now, if y'all need any insurance, this boy come talk to you. Y'all listen to him now." And so I met a lot of really powerful folks at that time. But he was mighty kind to me, mighty kind to me.
And so Mr. Wilson started the Francis Wood
He started
Wilson?
the foundation in 1954. He organized the foundation in 1954. And I went over there as a trustee in 1971. And since that time, Fran, we've been a foundation wasn't real big at that time, but we've been fortunate, and economic times have been good for us and so forth. And since I've been a trustee of the foundation, we've given away over $47 million to various charitable organizations and so on and so forth, and several $1 million in the Athens, Clark County area.
Right.
Several hundreds of $1,000s, and probably even in excess. I would think, quite frankly, that I've seen a report. I think we're giving over $1 million to the university during that period of time.
Good friends to the university.
Well, the university was good to me. It gave me an education. And,
now, when did you become chairman, CEO, chairman? What was your title, Terry? What is your title?
I'm the chairman now. I resigned as president back some time ago when I sort of retired. We had a lot of property when I went, and I began to see handwriting on the wall when I was beginning to get a little older, and we sold all the property. I negotiated a sale. We sold one piece of property at Emory University for about one piece probably I think we sold about $18-20 million.
Goodness.
And that was an interesting negotiation between Emory University and myself to sell that property, but it turned out to be a good deal for both of us. Mr. Wilson always told me, don't make a deal unless it's a good deal for both parties. You don't want anybody to be mad with you, so always, any deals you make them a good deal for both persons, your deal and the buyer's deal, and so forth, the seller's deal. But it's been an interesting job, and I think, Fran, probably one thing that I've enjoyed about it more than anything is scholarship funding. We give scholarship funds now, nearly $500,000 a year in scholarship funds to various colleges and so forth. And our board decided back some time ago that we were getting so many grant requests from around the country and so forth that we would restrict our giving to the state of Georgia. And also, Mr. Wilson was a Christian Scientist, and we give money to his mother church in Boston, Massachusetts, and a home in Chestnut Hill. Those are the only two things we give money to outside the state of Georgia. And I go to several of the schools. We give money, scholarship money, for example, to the Terry College every year, and have been doing so for a good number of years. I think we got started when Al Niemeyer first came here. And I have the best time going to these various colleges because I go and talk to them. I let them put a face on the money that they get, and they seem to enjoy that. But they pulled a fast one on me at Terry College the last several years, in that they started giving my money to graduate students, and they are so much smarter than I am that I have a hard time trying to go in there and talk to them, but they seem to have a good time with me, and I have a good time with them. We laugh and joke about the university and things, and I try to find out from them what their aspirations are and what they will hope to do and so on and so forth, and why they came to the University of Georgia and so forth and so on. All those things come up in our meetings, and their university, Terry College, has been really good about doing that for me, as have a lot of other colleges. We started several years ago also giving scholarship money to the veterinary medicine school, and we've had a great relationship with those folks over there too. They're real good about the way they respond to me and their things. And but we do it to a lot of colleges, and I go to a lot of colleges, and that's one. Mr. Wilson never had a chance to have a high level education, and he always liked scholarship funds. And we used to give all of our money to only deserving kids that needed the money to go to college. And the various colleges have begun to get me away from that because they say we need to give funds to kids who are highly educated that really need to, probably going to be very successful in the future. And we need to encourage them to come to Georgia as opposed to going to other colleges. So we need scholarship money for that, and I've begun to sort of let some of them do that. But it's been a wonderful experience.
What a great job to be able to give funding where you can help people make a difference.
Well, it is, Fran, but it's also a terribly difficult job because you can only give away so much money, and we'll have several $1 million worth of grant requests every year that our board has to turn down because we just don't have enough money to give it to all of them.
Yeah, that's the worst part, isn't it? Not having to say you can't do it now. That's the worst part. Having to say no, maybe.
And it's surprising sometimes how many people will. I've never had it happen to the University of Georgia. Anybody at the University of Georgia who I've given money to has been most appreciative of it, and they've understood when we didn't give it. Had to turn them down. But you'd be amazed. Some people that you turn down call you and say some pretty bad things to you. But you can't worry about that. They've got to have thick skin.
Goodness.
But it's been a wonderful experience, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm glad we have a 7-man board, and excuse me, I am the chairman, but I listen to my board members.
Good, thoughtful folks on there.
We think they're good folks, and I'm proud to have any and all of them on the board.
Well, I want to mention just a few of the other things, Terry, that you have been involved in terms of service to the community. And you mentioned Coach Bill Hartman, and of course that was the GSEF Student Fund. I think you were a trustee on that fund. Which
I was on that executive committee for as long as it was in existence.
Right.
When it disbanded.
We talked about the Georgia Alumni Society Board of Managers years ago, involved there. That
was a good time too, and we remember very fondly Tyus Button working with Tyus during that period of time. Tyus was a great love of the university also.
I know, just the most upbeat, positive fellow to me. Just a great guy.
Although not a native of Athens.
Well, does Jean count? Does Miss Jean Butler count as a native? I know. Maybe not. Maybe not. She was an Atlanta girl too, I think.
I think she was an Atlanta girl. Yeah, I believe that.
Married an Athens boy the first go around.
That doesn't count. That doesn't make you a native of Athens.
Oh. Yes, Dr. Botany Reed's son, I believe. You were a trustee of the Robert Woodruff Arts Center in Atlanta.
Yes, I was. That was interesting.
What a wonderful experience.
It was a great experience, and those were all captains of the various things in Atlanta, Georgia, and I met some mighty fine folks when I was involved with that organization, and it does well. It's because they have a lot of arms of that thing there. Art school and the symphony and everything else, all those various arms on that thing, and the Woodruff Board, of course, controls basically all of them. They make contributions to all of them.
And has done such a wonderful job to bring the culture to Atlanta in such a significant way, I think.
I agree wholeheartedly. It was a wonderful organization. Wesley Woods is a wonderful organization too. I served on that board over in Atlanta for a long, long time, and as a result of the board over there, on that board in Atlanta, I was also, I guess you'd say I was an advisory board member to the local university. Lanier Gardens and Thomas Terrace. And we have supported them as much as we could, and that was an interesting situation too. The Atlanta campus of Wesley Woods is wonderful, but the Lanier Gardens is so wonderful as far as I'm concerned because it saved my mother-in-law's life for many years. She was one of the first tenants over there, and that meant a lot to me and my wife both.
Well, and I think it's made a huge difference in town. It was early on, back in the early 70s, wasn't it?
Well, here again, those of us that are native Athenians know the value of location, and there's no doubt about the fact that Wesley Woods' location out there down Terrace and Lanier Gardens, they got the location. Now, some of these other places may be nice, but they haven't got the location.
It's location, as your real estate background too. Location.
That's it.
Absolutely. Well, we've made a move, and now we can just walk up the street, up the hill. That's our next move, I think, to tell me.
Joy's been trying to talk me into going over there, but I'm not quite ready, and I like my backyard a little bit. I'm not ready to go yet.
I'm not going to ask you to talk about your well today. Joy's already, I think that's going to be on Joy's
Yeah.
Joy's obsession.
No, I'm not going to tell you about my well.
Talk about Joy and your family a minute here, Will.
Well, I'm very fortunate in that I married a wonderful girl, and she was just I used to laugh and tease about it because she didn't complete much of an education at Georgia before I stole her away from her. As soon as I graduated, I told her she was through with school, and so we got married and had 2 wonderful sons, and both of whom graduated from the University of Georgia, and we've now got a granddaughter who is in the University of Georgia as I guess I have to say she may be a professional student because every time I turn around she calls me now and says I'm going to change my major, and I tell her that you change major one more time you're on your ear. So, but anyway, she's enjoying university and works hard, bless her heart. And we have 2 grandsons, and they got away from Georgia, and one of them graduated from Wake Forest, and one of them graduated from Ole Miss, and they're fine boys and doing okay. And one of them is fortunate enough, the youngest boy is fortunate enough that he's going to come back to Georgia, and he's going to work for Ron Carson this summer and get some training at the sports medicine.
That's great.
And hopes to pursue that career. And as far as I'm concerned, he can't get better training than he can from Ron Carson in that field. Ron Carson is a magnificent person. Just got back from climbing Mount Everest. Been over for 3 weeks. I hope he comes home safely.
I hope he gets back too.
Yeah, he is a wonderful person, and he's kind enough to let my youngest son do that. And then we are going to be great grandparents in August.
Is that right? Well, I know you're thrilled.
I must tell you one thing, Fran, that I'm proud about too, about my situation. In that when our oldest son got married, I happened to have the pleasure that my daughter-in-law asked me to give her away. So I walked her down the aisle to be married to my son. Of course, that makes tears come to my eyes every time I say it. But and then when my oldest grandson got married, who was going to have the baby, he and his wife, he asked me to be his best man. So I've done sort of the full circle situation with that situation. So that makes me feel pretty good. That
I was going to say, Terry, I think that says something.
Those 2 honors.
That says something about you.
Yeah.
So, and Jeff's telling me we're going to close.
Well,
we're going to finish off on that note. So, it has been such a pleasure to have you here today and to talk about between 2 native Athenians here, to talk about the Athens that we remember.
Well, so. I remember Athens very fondly. Now they would never move out of Athens. Athens is going to be my home for the rest of my life.